All right, welcome to one of our second to last episodes of this season one, Understanding the Science of You. And I am joined by the one and only Dr. Jamie Harms. And I've been, bugging is probably an appropriate word. And, to be able to get her onto the show here for a bit, but she's been tied up with a busy schedule and everything. So I'm extremely appreciative of her being able to make time here to join us. And one of the reasons, among many, that I always enjoy talking with Jamie, and I'm really excited to share Jamie's thoughts and perspectives, is because she always brings us something different and a very contrasting perspective or experience than the one that I've had. So I always pick up things, in our conversations. And so I know today is going to be a real doozy and a real treat here for everyone listening. So, how do I want to get this started? There are so many ways that I could describe you, and all of which seems like I'd feel like I'd be shortchanging you. So, what I will open with is just to say and when I talk about the differences, I have a pretty, I consider myself having a pretty strong, faith and belief in myself and who I am and my purpose and things of that nature, and being supported by the universe. And I know, and I always say that, that courage and belief, allows me to have the confidence to fight a lion. But Jamie's faith and belief is always allows her to have the courage to just walk past the lion. Right, and I think that those differences really kind of summarize, at least for me. I'm not speaking for you, but from me, in the way that I've kind of seen some of our differences. That's just one of the things then that's such a stark contrast, in realities, that I've always found it quite interesting, quite frankly fascinating, right? Because it is so different. And so I also know that you're also very private, and so I appreciate you allowing us to have a little peek behind the curtain here today. And so let's just help to make you a little bit more relatable to the listeners. Kind of just a little bit, like, how did you grow up? Did you grow up in the middle of the burbs, in the city? What was a little bit of your backstory?
I grew up in rural Minnesota on a farm.
Okay, rural Minnesota on a farm. So when you say a farm, does that mean like, hey, you had a couple of horses and pigs, and people think like, oh, I had some animals outside in a farm? Or are you talking like, hey, I might not necessarily see neighbors, and I'm on like hundreds of acres, and this is like a working, commercial farm?
Yes, all of the above. It's a working farm, and we have hundreds of acres, and we had hogs and horses. So, yes, a real live farm.
All right. And you lived there through your high school years, right? And then throughout your way, you found your way to Chicago, right? I know there's some steps along the way, but without making you backtrack your entire resume, right? So then you get yourself to Chicago, and Chicago, right, is then a pretty big difference from growing up on a farm, from what you've told me, correct?
Yes.
Yeah, yes. All right. And so I also bring that up because that's also from one of the things that if people have been paying attention, is the vast experiences and exposure that all of the guests have had in life, right? And so that's why I wanted to do this, because look, I think when people are able to operate from two separate places like that, they just bring very new perspectives, and intelligence to conversations. So anyway, so that's just where I'm just, trying to already set the stage for how in so many ways you already, cover such a wide spectrum of experiences there. And so then from there in Chicago, right, you find yourself going down the professional career path of physical therapy, right? And I know you're not going to toot your own horn, so I'm going to do a little toot for you without naming any names, right? But, because of yours, tell me if I'm wrong, by the way, right? So I'm not putting words in your mouth, but based on your treatment of patients, skills, abilities, healing methods, whatever you want to call it, you earned, a high end. I'm not gonna say high end in terms of well, I know high end clientele, right? You had both high end net worth individuals as well as um, professional sports teams or athletes that you worked with, um, you know, and so you're talking about a very small percentage of people that are able to achieve the levels, in success like that. So I know you're not going to toot your horn, but is anything that I've said incorrect?
No, no.
I know, no, I know, and I know you. And look, and that's one of the things that is, again, that I always appreciate you about you, and which is why you earned a lot. The opportunities that you did is because you really don't, like who somebody is secondary to how they are, right, or to what they're, kind of what they're made of, um, and so then you went from that, took a step back. Now then you went and got your doctorate in physical therapy, hence the Dr. Jamie Harms. In addition to that, you're also about to then earn your second doctorate, right? Doctor of chiropractic here, upcoming. Is that also accurate?
Yeah.
All right. So you have a dual doctorate for yourself, and look, I think that the reason why that's also the duality of your doctorates are also interesting because typically physical therapy and chiropractic are at odds with each other, and so it takes somebody who's able to really focus on how do I be the best healer and helper to people to be able to embrace, and remain open to the various healing methodologies. And so, would you mind sharing a little bit about how you were able to bridge from, having one mindset to, embracing, what many would consider as conflicting, and you see them as more completing?
Yeah, I think it just goes down to keeping an open mind and not being closed minded off to other professionals, and that I don't know it all, and together we can be a stronger team than separately.
Right. And so, but like, how does like the understanding, I think we've had various conversations, and it's easy for doctors to get caught up into their specific methodology as you know what I mean, the way, the record of truth, things of that nature, right? But look, there's a certain, like you've acknowledged, there's certain things that you recognize that you can do in treating people via chiropractic that you can't with physical therapy, and vice versa, right? Is
Yes.
that right? Yeah, right. And so, and I guess in that type of a mindset, um, have you always been open to that, or have you, to being
Yes.
remaining your whole life? Or okay, so that's go ahead. I didn't mean to cut you off, please.
No, yes. That's just keeping an open mind. Most people are closed minded to their own professions as being the one and only. So it's just keeping an open mind and letting go of your own ego.
And so, so are you excited about? I know you're getting ready to graduate here, so you're getting ready to get excited to be able to um, put both of those healing modalities together, and into work and into play.
Yeah.
And then there's a third one here that I want to lean into, and I don't know how would you kind of describe your um, beyond the traditional five senses, what you bring to the healing, right? Like how do you use your intuitiveness to be the best healing practitioner?
Listening.
Right. There's listening, but you've also shared with me that you can like sense where there's certain like aches in the body or things like that, and that's kind of the path I'm looking to go down.
Oh, yeah. It's just a gift I've had with my hands. So ever since I started.
Yeah. So to walk us through this gift with your hands, I think a lot of people find this very fascinating. B, find it very cool, and then can also recognize how valuable this is for a healthcare practitioner to have this. So what do you mean by you get extra information through your hands?
I just can feel what's beneath my hands, where some people don't have that degree of sensation or feeling. So that's literally all it comes down to.
All right. And so I will go. So let's go say in a physical therapy setting, right? How does that help you to get additional information besides, let's say, what you were taught via, textbooks and how to understand and feel?
That you can feel what's wrong. So it's an extra information. So the more information you have, the more you can help a person.
That's right. Look, and I think that's a really important point, and that's going to come up in a lot of different and throughout the rest of our conversation. So I want to move on here. Your experience and exposure in life is so broad and so vast that number one, I don't know that I'm ever going to. I don't know if I'd ever get you to actually ever talk about it here on a podcast, but needless to say, it. Like as you just heard, keeping an open mind, having then a vast experiences, all only leads down to more information to make the best decisions available, helping self, helping others. Anyway, so as you've kind of like a lot of the listeners, myself, you've been on your own personal journey here, over the last few years. I mean, obviously lifetime, but things have kind of picked up in intensity, we'll say. over the last few years, and things have been super busy. Right, I had the luxury of going through a lot of my transformations and changes. Being able to be a hermit and isolated. You've had to do it, going to school and being in the public and other things like that, right? Which makes it more challenging. And so, one of the things that I've also talked about in this podcast has been taking the new self into old places and things and seeing how that goes. And so a lot of the guests have been open and sharing, right, to help people feel more comfortable to overcome any concerns or fears that they have of, starting to show their new selves. And so, generally speaking, how have your friends or your, received the new, I guess, the new you, or however you want to kind of describe that?
Have they received me?
Yeah. Like, have they been supportive? Are they like, oh my God, you're weird. What's going on with you? We love it. Oh, like, this is great to see this, or, like, how are they seeing you or describing you differently?
I guess just different, more outspoken, more assertive. I think as everyone gets wiser, those are the qualities that go with that personality trait.
You just mentioned the words outspoken and assertive, and I want to stop. I want to pause there for a moment because I think those are really, really important, because we've already talked about how the depth of experiences and exposure in life and successes, right, and things that you've accomplished, and yet here you are, right, still acknowledging, hey, there's more to go. There's still more to grow and more to get better, right? And becoming more confident, and comfortable in self to become more outspoken and assertive, right? Look, I think that really speaks to one of the underlying themes that's also been, that I'm hoping that people are picking up on, which is this thing we're calling living in life. It's it's a whole journey of learning, right? It's not about, hey, you had to figure it out and then set it, forget it, and stop going. And so I just wanted to point that out, that even after everything that you've accomplished in life, you still remain open, still have an open mind, still focus on personal growth, not just professional growth. And look, there's not a lot of people that are willing to do that. So I just want to compliment you on that. And so we were talking the other day, and you said a couple of things, and that was like, yes, exactly, yes, you're getting it. And one of those was, I don't know, you mentioned something along the lines of having a better understanding of how not being your genuine or authentic self truly affects you. Would you mind kind of sharing, what your observation or learning was about that?
Yeah, if you are, deep down not wanting to do something you are forcing yourself to do and not being authentic to your own desires, then it creates an internal turmoil and essentially unhappiness.
And so like, how does that kind of then manifest itself in ways that you maybe weren't even aware of, right? And throughout your healing process.
Well, the internal turmoil can be anything from a headache to a stomach ache to agitation to lack of sleep. I mean, there's a whole gamut of reactions that your body will manifest when you're not doing what your intention is.
Oh, so I was just going to do a shameless plug here and say, so you're saying that, based on everything you just rattled off, it's really important then for somebody to understand the science of themselves. So they understand how to recognize when their body's talking to them and what it's saying.
Yeah, the body will always tell you.
And so let's talk about that a little bit, right? We'll talk about the body I was telling you, and then that kind of leans into the other comment that you made about improving the quality of life by adjusting your expectation to that of going into situations with a, hey, I'm here to learn, and having an open mind and curiosity versus maybe a specific expectation. The way you said it was also better than I'm saying it right now. So
Yeah, it just simplifies every interaction if you're not going into it wanting to feel better or with your ego in mind, but rather um, as gaining information about the other person and how they react and respond. It just tells you more about them.
and that goes back to another point that you said earlier, which is listening.
Mm-hmm.
Right, being able to listen in the conversations. And I think that in itself really is an important skill, because everything you just talked about can't be done if you're the one doing all the talking in a conversation.
Correct.
Right? And so that also that also brings into, understanding and recognizing. You've also started to recognize how your different interactions, adjust, affect your energies differently. And so, yeah, so share a little bit more about kind of how you've, through the, understanding the science of you, right? Through your, both people, environment, and clothes, right? Kind of like what your outlook was on those things before, now that you recognize how they affect you, and then how you handle them differently. I think there's a lot of value in helping people to, understand that and bridge that starting and ending.
Yeah, it's just creating an awareness of how you respond to everyone and everything and listening to your body and your emotions in terms of how it's affecting you, and then making decisions moving forward based on that.
Right. And so, let's just say, will you go into a couple examples here? They're pretty common in everyday life for people. One is, getting together with acquaintances, personal, professional, whatever it might be, right? So did you talk about feelings or emotions or understanding how things affecting you? What's kind of like your kind of self checklist walking away from those things to understand them, to understand how those things were affecting you, or how that situation affected you?
Yeah, just how are you feeling? Did it give you a stomach ache? How's your energy? How's your attitude? Are they draining? Are they uplifting? Do you feel better? Do you feel drained? So it's just a self check in. How does this person affect me?
Which again continue to demonstrate what I was mentioning earlier about things. It's never life in learning is not a set it and forget it, right? It's constantly being able to learn how to take in as much information as possible. And so those answers to all the questions that you said are going to vary, are going to vary in each interaction, right? So you got to be able to keep an open mind and listen, to be able to understand, each situation and person differently. And there was another interesting one that I know that I feel like, based on our conversations, played a big factor in your life, which was a big factor, but I mean, definitely, helped the happiness factor, which was understanding clothes.
Yes.
and and how clothes affected you, and then how that altered how you would dress before versus dress now. And I think that's a very I think this is a very, very real topic that's really, really important. And I'm not I think I'm a guy. I'm not the one who to be speaking on these matters, but I think that this is something that as a female, you can speak to better than me is understanding dress and the differences of how trying to fit in versus being self. And going back to your comments about being your genuine authentic self, I think I'm going to try to get us to stick here for a moment. So since I just said a lot, my first question is then about just clothes, right? How did you kind of understand how to leverage clothes to your betterment compared to what your prior understanding was?
Just paying attention, learning how my clothes affects my mood, whether that's color, fit, size, and then, it comes down to paying attention to yourself again and not comparing yourself to others, as that will only rob you of your own joy and uniqueness.
Hmm.
So just celebrating your own uniqueness in that human experience of what do I want to wear today? How do I want to feel?
So did you all of a sudden start showing up with your friends dressed differently than what they would have been used to seeing you in as well?
Gradually, yeah, little bit by little bit.
Yeah. And how was that received?
I mean, it was noticeable. There wasn't criticized. So
Was it embraced? Were people like, "Wow, it's great to see you," being more yourself, or did they not? I guess that's what I'm trying to get at.
I think it wasn't as deep as that. It's more of, wow, you're dressing different, as simple as that. It was more of my own self knowledge.
Good, cool, all right. The reason I was going down that path was just more about because everyone you start to think about, the more I start to expose more of my genuine and authentic self, I open myself up to criticism, right? And there's so based on however whatever you said to yourself to make you comfortable with that is what is where the value was in sharing it with people. And so you came at it again from a different perspective than what I was thinking about it. And so I'm again the reason why I enjoy your insights all the time. Do you kind of incorporate into your morning routine, your dressing, thinking about who am I going to interact with today, what do I need to get done, or is it not, or is it just more of throw stuff on and go out? Walk us through a little bit about that.
No, just like I explained, it's more about what am I, what energy do I want? Well, how do I want to feel? So,
And so do you feel so yeah, but do you feel it after you take clothes off the rack? Do you feel it after do you try them on? Right, that's I'm trying to help people understand, establish kind of routines for themselves as well, to figure out and engage into how they themselves then lean into the connection between themselves and the clothes to see how they're feeling.
yeah, all of the above. Looking at your clothes, what am I going to do today? What do I need to wear? How do I want to feel? How does this outfit make me feel? This color? How do I want to come across?
So again, so the point is, look, there's thoughtfulness and purposefulness behind when you start your day and you're putting on your clothes, right? There's a significance here in what you're wearing. There's a purposefulness, there's a thoughtfulness that then sets up so much of you being prepared, for the rest of your day. Is that kind of, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but is that kind of a fair assessment?
Yeah.
Cool. Look, I think that's important, right? Because I think it's way too easy to fall into the habit of, I only need 15 minutes. I just got to wake up, jump in and out of the shower, grab something and to wear and run out the door, right? And to become very efficient. However, sometimes in that efficiency and hurry up in the fast pace of life, it's very easy to miss the effectiveness, right, of what we're doing. And so, a lot of what you're talking about is tapping into that effectiveness and purposefulness and thoughtfulness, and how that then sets you up for the rest of the day, right? Like, and I know, like, back when I was in my corporate world, I was, I definitely looked at, each day my dress, I viewed it as my armor for the day. Unfortunately, I viewed it as armor versus something that had a little bit more of a pleasant theme to it. But hey, that's where I was at that point in my life, right? And so, anyway, and so I think it's just important for people to be able to figure out how to, if they, to carve out some time for themselves in the morning to have that kind of connection of where am I at, how I want to feel for the day. Am I surrounding myself with the stuff that's going to support me to get there? All right, now I feel ready to take on whatever's coming. And so it's also talking about being prepared for the day and being prepared for this, how things affect you. One of the things that you've also been bringing to my attention has been the ingredients in food.
Yes.
And sometimes things that I would never have thought of as quote unquote not great for you or not good for you, because in many cases they're in products that are deemed as healthy, right? And so if you wouldn't mind sharing, I think this is also really important because a lot of our listeners will identify as either sensitive to energy, sensitive to foods, neurodivergent. And food obviously plays a factor then, in how the body reacts. And some of these substances definitely affect emotions. So, anyway, that being said, would you mind sharing, a couple of the common ones that people should look out for, in their ingredients to try to avoid, as well as, if applicable, what some of the side effects can be so that people can recognize, if in fact maybe they are having some of these side effects, not recognizing it.
Yeah. Unfortunately, there's probably more than less in what everyone's daily eating habits are. Like MSG, reading labels, making sure monosodium glutamate is not in it. It's very damaging to neurons in the brain and memory. Or sweeteners, anywhere from aspartame sweet and low to anything that is, they say for diabetes, no sugar added, but that means there's something added to make it sweet. And then the addictive process that our brain and bodies get to that sugar taste. So definitely reading labels, and then it can make you jittery or make you irritable or stomach aches, headaches, the whole gamut of responses. So
Sucralose,
keeping a
that's
food
one
log
of,
for sure.
yeah. Is sucralose one of the sweeteners or one of the ingredients that can contribute to the list of symptoms you just mentioned?
Oh yeah.
All right. And then I think another one you've mentioned to me is this, and this is the one that boggles my mind. I mean, I don't know how else to react to it but laugh. Natural flavors,
Natural flavoring.
natural
Yep.
flavorings. Okay. Is there a difference between natural flavors and natural flavoring?
Maybe. We don't know. That's up to whoever put the label on the package.
Okay, okay, good. That's an important distinction. And so when it says natural flavoring, one would think, oh, natural flavoring. That means it's got to be good for me, better than a chem lab.
Not
But you're
necessarily. We
telling,
don't know what that natural flavoring is. So it doesn't
and so
really tell you what it is.
like if people say, okay, well, what is it about natural flavoring that makes it harmful? And if it's harmful, why is it in some of our food still? Right? Or is this one of those things that, yeah, it's in our food, but the FDA has also got it under review and saying, hey, we probably shouldn't be doing this anymore. Kind of like, oh my gosh, the other ones you made me thought, I think it was like yellow number 5. That's another one.
Well, any
These
dyes
things,
are toxic.
yeah,
So any
yeah,
food dyes, we don't need dye in our body.
yeah. And so you talked about the toxicity or the neurotoxicity of some of these.
Yeah. which can be toxic to your brain health. So simple as it affects memory and Alzheimer's and dementia. So if we don't know what it is, probably shouldn't be ingesting it. So if you read something and you don't know what it is on a label, then it's a sure tell sign not to take it.
And you and I have had this conversation many times, and this is a real challenge in life, both in just living a healthy life, just living a healthy life, right? Is how expensive it is, right? To quote unquote eat healthy, because the stuff that's got all these other ingredients sure seems to be a lot more affordable.
Correct.
Yeah, and so that's I know, and I'm not saying that you or I have figured this out, because I think that as we've talked about various skills, the ability to grocery shop appropriately isn't necessarily our highest one. So, but like, what can we do? So, is there any advice though to help people that are like, hey man, when I got to figure out between starving versus putting some of this not so great stuff in my body, how do I help to navigate those waters? Any feedback or any thoughts on?
Just reading labels. The more natural something is, the better. So you don't have to starve yourself. It's just more of reading labels and staying away from preservatives and boxed and canned items typically. So walking in a grocery store around the outside versus the inside is one general rule of thumb.
And you did bring, and that's a good point. I want to expand on it, which was the reading of the labels. It's not just the reading of the labels to understand what are some of the ingredients that we're trying to avoid, but it's also recognizing reading the labels, because sometimes you can be surprised at how you may not think that a brand has decent ingredients, but it does, and is also affordable, right? And so, I think it's something very small, and I know it's not great to begin with, but compared to the options and it being seasonal, right? Like I was all excited to by a brand name, a caramel dip for apples, right? Because of our conversations, I would no longer purchase the caramel apples here in the fall time, which I enjoy doing. I feel like it's kind of festive, so right? So I enjoy, having a caramel apple or two. But in order to get them safe on the shelves, they contain all kinds of stuff that you shared with me that, I won't put in my body anymore. So I was all bummed out. But then, but because I spent the time to read labels, I was able to find, an alternative that didn't contain that stuff. And so that I could enjoy my apple and have some caramel apples and it was affordable. So it was a nice middle ground. So I just wanted to point that out, that it's not just about, reading labels to exclude things, but recognizing how that will also, add to inclusivity as well. And so I know that I've talked about learning and the importance of, and fun, the importance of learning through animals, right? I personally have used, squirrels as an example, but I know that you also have, a friend near and dear to your heart, Sophia, who is, we've talked about being a little bundle of wisdom. And I think this is important, because when I've talked about interacting with squirrels and nature and animals, it's been about kind of me tapping in information via their collective consciousnesses. But your communication with Sophia and learning with Sophia has been one on a more one-to-one basis, which has been able to enrich the relationship and communication between you two. But also, and this is the part that I want to really point out too, is that as you've challenged Sophia to learn, right, she continues to comprehend and to learn more, and so just supporting the other point. I'm doing a shameless plug right now, because I know how smart Sophia is, right? That animals, while the intelligence is different, animals are wildly intelligent and can demonstrate that to us if we just give them the opportunity. So anyway, I'm over talking here and not allowing you a chance to talk about little precious Sophia. And so I didn't grow up with dogs. right, in the same ways that you did. And so I'm not able to articulate and to give Sophia credit for some of the ways that you noticed, that she was that she displayed some intelligence differently than some of the other dogs, and then how you've been able to kind of create your own language to talk with her. And and then I'm sure people at home would want to try to figure out how to do some of that for themselves. So let me ask you how how is Sophia different than some of the dogs you've had in the past?
She's much more in tune with me, probably because we're together all the time. Whereas, growing up, I was with farm animals, so they were mostly outside, inside. Um, but we, you know, have learned basically and appreciated each other's routines and listening to her and paying attention to her, different barks, her different mannerisms of what she does, and then learning what that means. So it's basically just paying attention.
Yeah. So could you give some examples of how would you like to say, what are some of the ways that she talks to you?
I mean, like I just said, her different barks. So whether she wants, I know if she has to go potty, I know if she's hungry, I know if it's I want outside, I know if it's I want to play. So
That's a lot
she
from a
wants a
bark. A lot of people
treat.
would be.
Yeah,
I mean, right, I think a
that's
lot of
where the
people
paying
would be like,
attention comes in hand.
yeah. So how did you figure out by paying attention that translated to those things?
By paying attention, by listening.
Right.
It's as simple as that. If you don't, then you're just assuming and telling them to
Right.
stop barking.
True. So at some point though, there's like, but yeah, at some point you learn when this bark meant, hey, I want to go outside, or versus I want a treat, right? And so would that be like because you went to give her a treat, and yet she still was barking, so you recognize that wasn't it, right? Like that's kind of what I'm trying to get a little granular here.
Well, if she wants to go outside, she'll go to the door. What are her manual? What is she doing in conjunction with that bark?
Got it. And so what is yeah? She points at things, right? That's one of the ways that I know that you guys have learned to communicate with each other.
Yes, she will look
How
at
did
it.
Yeah, she'll bark and then go look at things.
Yep.
Yeah. And so like that's kind of had some fun stories with having friends over, and they're like, what's your dog doing?
Yeah. Well, she's talking to you.
Yeah. And so yeah, I remember you sharing something like they said your dog's barking at me, and I think what was your reaction back to them?
Because she wants something. She's
Yeah.
talking to you. So it's usually she wants something. So,
And then I think you said, is she looking or pointing somewhere? And they were like, yeah, she keeps looking at the cupboard. And you were like, oh yeah, that means she wants a treat.
yeah.
And to me, right, like I was like, this is just kind of what I've become used to her. And so when I hear those, I just kind of take that for granted. You guys have your language, and I don't know, maybe everyone in the dogs are like that, right? I don't know, but those obviously those reactions from your friends are like, yeah, no, normally, they're dogs are not as proactive of communicators as little Sophia tends to be. She
Yeah.
tends to be a very proactive
Yes.
communicator.
Mm-hmm.
And so for those that are trying to figure, because look, you've also created a safe space for her to learn, right? And one of the things that she taught me in the learning process was I mean, it took me forever. Besides just really understanding love, was also understanding the power of positive reinforcement. And because that was something I never really experienced, and neither of our learning styles are for the faint of heart, and Sophia tends to have that same she's going to learn it her way, as the two of us. So how did you? But as you allow her to learn her way, right? She's grown into her own. And so, how would you advise other pet owners, dog owners, to kind of tap into and help them to unlock their dog's personality or communication and enrich that relationship? Any would you have any suggestions?
Yeah, pay attention, listen, watch them, just like the dog watches you and learns your behaviors. That's the only way you learn theirs.
Speaking of learning styles, right, and talk about neither of our learning styles are for the faint of heart. Um, we've talked about but wow, on one hand, boy, it'd be nice to not have to learn in such painful lessons sometimes. On the other hand, acknowledge that we had to work it through so many different ways, and until we figured it out. Right, and as a result of that, right, so we sometimes talk about could we have learned? Are we going back in life? Could we have learned things any differently than the path that we took or not took? And and again, I'm not asking you to speak for women or anything like that. Just asking you to speak for you, right? You want to one of the things that we've talked about too is the way that women have been trained or conditioned to fit into a certain role and conforming in society versus understanding their individualized self with their individualized goals and things like that. Is there any advice that, knowing what you know now, right, that you would go back and give to your little self to help you, kind of tap into things, early at a younger age? And I say things just meaning getting comfortable in your own skin, knowledge, wisdom, or do you hey, think everything kind of happened as it needs to? And no, I wouldn't necessarily go back and give my little self any advice.
No, because everything unfolds in the divine order it's supposed to. That would change the trajectory of everything.
When were you able to adapt that perspective of, yeah, look, things happen as they were supposed to, and genuinely, I mean, it's one thing to say it, right? But I know that you literally live it, right? So was that something you were always that way, or is that somewhere along the way it just kind of it happened?
I think it's just the journey of authenticity and growth, and having love and compassion for yourself, and change, and making mistakes. And sometimes we have to redo something over and over until it grabs hold of us and we learn from it. That's part of self discovery and self fulfillment.
Yeah, and that's an important part, right? Which you just talked about, which is we got to get to know ourselves, right? And there seems to be a weaponization of the learning process that's happened, right? Meaning where people say, "Well, I told you shouldn't have done that, or you shouldn't do that, or if you just listen to me," right? And in doing so, while the intentions are good, the unintended consequence then is people learn how to stop thinking for themselves if they just do what everybody tells them to do, right?
Yeah, there's no shoulds. Like you could should yourself all day long.
So there's another thing this is another thing that we've talked about, and I don't think it's talked about enough, which is nourishing the soul, so to speak, right? And Johnny, who's a prior guest, and right, he talks about movement, right? For him, that's a part of it, right? And with you, movement, I think you start to understand how dance was something and how that affects you, and the importance of being able to have something like that in your life as well. And so I guess how have you how have you better come to understand and recognize when you need when you need a little bit of that extra nourishment, and then giving it to yourself.
Just paying attention again to yourself and how it affects you. It's in the stillness and the quiet of those moments where you really get to know your true self versus the chaos of life. So, taking those moments, it only takes 90 seconds to process an emotion. So, taking that time to acknowledge your emotion and where it came from.
So how do you? So you've talked a lot about taking the time to watch or to pay attention and to process. But you've also you've been going to school, getting a doctorate degree, so you're obviously spending a lot of time doing as well, right? And so how do you balance the observation and the doing?
You just learn. You just do it. You just, it's, again, another experiment of what works for you.
Okay. And so is that something that was always that way, or was that one of those things that's kind of evolved?
I think part of it is both answers. So part of it is ingrained in each of us, and then part of it we learn what works for us as we become older and wiser and more receptive to listening to our emotions versus pushing them in.
The underlying theme of also what you're saying is, look, you need to understand yourself if you want to be able to it requires taking a lot of information and being able to process it without getting sidetracked all the time too, right?
Right,
Am I
but it
right?
doesn't take a lot of time. It really
Right.
doesn't.
Yeah.
It's
Why
90
doesn't it?
seconds to process an emotion, but most
Right.
people don't acknowledge when that emotion is there.
And so let's talk about that processing of emotion. And I'm going to go and just, one of the things that, we've talked about like healing, and, I'm not going to go down any specifics here, but one of the things that we've talked about is, how understanding the science of you helps healing in a way that, certain traditional, therapy or, things like that doesn't always necessarily go, or, I don't want to say what is or is not healing, but I will say that, you know, that there are different ways to go through healing that can be less traumatic than others. That's what I'll say, right? And I think that in order to be able, and if someone's going to do deep self work, you're going to dive deep into trauma, and we'd all agree that process doesn't need to be any more difficult than what it has to be, or in reliving things, and so processing of that emotion, and one of the things that I know that you've come to learn in that processing is also recognizing how when we're not that genuine and authentic self, and how some of that kind of wears on us until we recognize some of those emotions or lies that we've told ourselves that are associated with that. And so I think that that's another part of listening and recognizing stuff. I would ask, is there a better way that you could better words that you could use in the way that I fumbled through it to describe that, um, you know, like truly healing and letting go of stuff, right? By just understanding hey, this is a lie I told myself. When someone pops up again, you put it through a new lens, and it's able to be, dealt with differently.
Yeah, just I guess acknowledging if it's something still triggers you, you haven't dealt with it, that trauma. So acknowledging what is triggering you and why, and then dealing with that so you can move forward.
Yeah. And so when you say dealing with that, that'd be like, because this is what I'm trying to get at here, right? Is that in a lot of cases there's like this deep reliving of things that I think a lot of people feel is necessary to go through. That your and I's experiences of dealing with things is not necessarily that case, right? And so I want to share with people, especially those that have been trying to let go of letting historical traumas affect them anymore, and maybe some of the methods they've been trying haven't necessarily worked for them, right? To be able to get rid of it, even though they kind of did the stuff that, hey, they're like, hey, I did the checkbooks, I did the workbooks. Why isn't it working? And so, what were some of the things that you did along your journey that you found that helped you, that worked for you, that were differently maybe than what's kind of what's taught, that people can use to better identify, and let go of those things inhibiting them.
I guess usually the answer is within yourself. So identifying why it's triggering you, and if it still is, and what's the story you're telling yourself. So where our mind will tell ourselves a story. And so usually it's based on what's happened to us in the past. So reframing that story with the truth.
Uh, and that's that part that then can be challenging, and that sometimes facing that truth, you know, that I guess that's part of that journey that everyone's got to figure out for themselves, right? Whether they want
Right.
to, yeah. So based on the type of person you are today, not the type, I don't know, just who you are today, right? Versus who you were before a few years ago, before you kind of started your more intense journey. Do you feel like it for you personally? Was it worth it for you to um, do that tough stuff?
Oh, yeah. Otherwise, you'll keep reliving it. So
Uh,
you have to
okay,
let
so you
go of
found
who you,
relief,
yeah, you have to let go of who you think you should be, because then your true self can shine through.
and let me guess, finding your true self comes from paying attention.
Yep.
It took a little bit, but I'm starting to notice an underlying theme of paying attention and
Mm-hmm.
and observing. And so, how do you? Again, I know your schedule. I know how busy you are. So, I know you said it only takes 90 seconds to process an emotion, but look, taking in information, processing things, people, situations, that stuff doesn't all just take 90 seconds, right? And so, how have you figured out how to skinny that down to just the stuff that matters from so much information around you to then be able to make decisions with?
Those quiet moments, you have to have stillness. You can't have your TV on, you're reading a book. You can't. You just have to have quiet moments. So that's where that meditative time comes in play. And it
So,
doesn't have to be a long time.
I guess I didn't mean to interrupt you there. So, would you say, so is setting boundaries, in terms of, to give yourself that time, something that you've also then is an important part of your days or routines?
Oh, yeah, definitely. Or you wouldn't get anything done if you didn't have boundaries.
Okay. And then the last thing that I want to kind of touch on here is we talked about how I've mentioned like circumstances or surroundings, but really one of the easy ways to think about it is like you can't just, for many people, there's only just so much you can do in your office space, right? But your home space, and I think this is one of the things that I've noticed you having also a much greater, you're starting to unlock, an understanding of is how to make your space conducive to yourself or the energies. How would you kind of describe? I don't want to. How would you describe the importance of that, and how you've come to understand the importance of that?
I mean, I think it just goes back to long back the feng shui of why people set up homes the way they do, why colors affect us, why arrangement affects us. So,
And so, did you end up change? So, as you've gone through some of your transformation, and we talked about some of your clothes style changing. Did some of your decorating style or the way that you decorated the surroundings of where you live, did that also then change?
yeah, because as I've learned to pay attention how things affect me. So whether that's a color or artwork or a piece of furniture that I don't like to sit in, that affects your mood. So,
And so, if somebody was like, "Wow, I agree. This is great." I obviously recognize Jamie, Dr. Jamie, the value in having the time for reflection like this. Where do I start? Do I start with my relationships? Do I start with my personal self? Do I start with my professional self? Do I start with my pet? Right? Do you have any suggestions for helping somebody to figure out how to get started without feeling, so they don't feel so overwhelmed, because it's a lot of work what we're talking about here, but but it should not feel overwhelming.
no, it's not really a lot of work. It's literally as simple as pay attention to one thing at a time, and it'll come up for you. If it doesn't, it's not bothering you. those things will change.
Gotcha. So I know you stepped away here to be able to have this conversation today. So again, so I really appreciate it. I want to give you, as we kind of wrap up here, is there any advice that you would want to give to the audience, or words of encouragement, as we wrap up?
I think again, just not playing into the I should be this, should be that, but let your true essence of yourself shine through by letting go of that.
Okay. And what would you say to people if they're like, well, is it worth putting in it? What would you say to, what encouragement, words of encouragement would you say to people, is to say, hey, this is what's on the other side of that. And so this is why it's worth doing.
You can learn to become more grateful of every moment and person. So we each have something to teach each other.
And I think anybody you knows, if you're leading a life of gratitude, you tend to be also then be leading a pretty happy and fulfilling, meaningful life as well.
Yep.
So, all right. Well, thank you, Dr. Harms, for providing the deep. I know that you may have not given paragraphs of words, but the information that you provided was relatable, simple to understand, and actionable, right? And which is really important to helping my listeners, which is to learn how to get comfortable in their own skin and think for themselves, right? I mean, if we want to create change in the world, it starts with healthy people that feel confident in their own skin and learn how to think for themselves. I think you'd agree.
Yep, deeper.
And so, so I thank you for helping to contribute to that. And listeners, I hope that you enjoyed today's conversation as well, and that you have yourself a great, awesome, and productive week. Take care.